The soft, omnipresent chime of the harmony bells was supposed to be a comfort, a gentle reminder of the peace and prosperity the Vex Concordance had brought to Earth. It echoed from the crystalline spires that now pierced the skylines of what were once human cities, structures that seemed to hum with a life of their own, their pearlescent surfaces shifting with the slow, deliberate pulse of Vex technology. To most, the sound was a lullaby, the sonic signature of an era without war, without famine, without want. But to Jax, it was the sound of a cage door closing, a subtle, melodic grinding of a lock he could feel but not see. He stood on the rain-slicked balcony of his cramped hab unit in Neo-Denver Sector 7, the neon glow of Vex-approved commerce painting shimmering, distorted rivers on the permacrete below. The air, once thin and crisp with mountain chill, was now heavy and humid, meticulously climate-controlled by the atmospheric processors humming silently in the stratosphere, another gift from their alien benefactors. They had come not with warships and plasma cannons, but with open hands and promises of a golden age. They offered cures for humanity's every ailment, solutions to its deepest divisions, and technology that leaped centuries in a single bound. They asked for nothing in return, or so they claimed, except partnership, a seat at the Galactic table. Humanity, free from its own self-inflicted wounds, had accepted with open, desperate arms. That was 50 years ago. Now, human culture was a museum piece, human ambition a curbed and managed resource. People were content, their needs met by Vex replicators, their minds placated by immersive neurosims, their lives extended by gene therapies that made the Concordance seem like gods. But this placid existence came at a cost Jax was only beginning to understand. Below, a Vex arbitrator glided down the street, its tall, slender form encased in polished chrome-like armor, its movements impossibly fluid. Humans gave it a wide berth, their gazes averted, a conditioned reflex of deference. The Vex didn't rule with overt force. They ruled with the crushing weight of their superiority. They were humanity's saviors, its patrons, its keepers. And Jax, a former corporate retrieval specialist, now a glorified courier shuffling data chips for a Vex subsidiary, felt the gilded bars of their benevolence tightening every day. His comlink vibrated against his wrist, a discreet pulse. It was a ghost line, a relic from his old life that he'd kept meticulously hidden from Vex network sweeps. The message was a single, untraceable glyph, a stylized raven in flight. It was time. He pulled his synth leather jacket tight, the worn fabric a stark contrast to the sleek, seamless world around him, and descended into the city's lower levels, where the Vex's light didn't shine so brightly. The Undercity was a tangle of old-world architecture and makeshift tunnels, a place where the harmony bells were a distant, muffled annoyance. Here, human ingenuity wasn't a historical footnote, it was a survival tool. Unregulated markets thrived in the shadows, trading in pre-concordance tech, black market replicator codes, and the most dangerous commodity of all unfiltered information. Jax navigated the labyrinthine corridors with a practiced ease, his senses sharp. The air smelled of ozone, recycled water, and the spicy aroma of real food cooked over open flames, a stark defiance of the sterile nutrient paste most of the planet consumed. He found Alara in a secluded alcove behind a stall, selling scavenged electronics, the flickering light of a plasma torch casting her face in stark relief. Her hands, stained with grease and flux, moved with the precise grace of a surgeon as she rewired a pre-concordance drone. She didn't look up as he approached. "You're late," she murmured, her voice a low rasp. The arbitrator patrols are getting tighter. Jax leaned against the grimy wall, crossing his arms. They're just herding the sheep, making sure none of us wander from the pen. Alara finally looked up, her eyes, the color of storm clouds, holding a fire that had been extinguished in most of humanity. Some of us don't like being penned. She wiped her hands on a rag and gestured toward a reinforced door hidden behind a tapestry of frayed wires. He's waiting. The man inside was old, his face a roadmap of wrinkles that spoke of a time before the Vex, a time of genuine struggle and genuine freedom. He sat behind a makeshift table, a single incandescent bulb hanging above him, illuminating the worn data slate in his hands. His name was Silas, and he was the closest thing the growing resistance had to a leader. Jax. Silas greeted him, his voice thin but resonant with an authority that had nothing to do with alien technology. Thank you for coming. Jax remained standing, his posture wary. The Ravenglyph is a big risk. Silas, if the Vex trace it, the Vex believe we are happy in our zoo. Silas interrupted, a faint, bitter smile on his lips. Their arrogance is our greatest shield. For now. He slid the data slate across the table. I have a job for you, something your old skills are uniquely suited for. Jax glanced at the slate but didn't touch it. His old life was one of violence and moral ambiguity, retrieving assets and people for corporations that were now little more than puppet shows for the Vex. He had left that life behind for a reason. I'm a courier now, old man. I move packages, not people. We know what they're doing, Silas said, ignoring his protest, his gaze intense. We finally have proof. He tapped the slate. It's not partnership, Jax. It's a harvest. Slow, methodical, and total. The words hung in the small room, heavier than the humid air. Jax had felt it, this gnawing sense that something was wrong, but he had never been able to put a name to it. The Vex had eliminated disease, but birth rates had been steadily declining for 2 decades. They had ended scarcity, but human creativity had all but vanished, replaced by a bland, Vex-approved aesthetic. People lived longer, healthier, emptier lives. What kind of harvest? Jax asked, his voice barely a whisper. Our potential, Alara said, stepping into the room from the shadows. Our spark, the very thing that makes us human. We found a Vex medical archive, hidden deep in their central network. They're not curing us, Jax. They're sterilizing us. Not our bodies, but our spirit. A subtle retrovirus woven into the gene therapies, the replicator food, even the air. It suppresses aggression, ambition, innovation. The traits that made us a threat. Silas leaned forward. They saw what we were capable of, our chaotic, violent, brilliant nature. They feared it, so they decided to prune it, to turn us into a docile, manageable species, a pet. In another generation, we won't even have the will to question them. We'll just listen to the harmony bells and be content. The truth hit Jax with the force of a physical blow, a cold, sickening realization that contextualized everything he had seen. The averted eyes, the placid smiles, the slow fading of human art and music. It wasn't peace. It was domestication. He thought of his younger brother, Leo, who had died not in a war or from a disease, but from a quiet, creeping apathy, losing interest in his art, his friends, and finally, his own life, a decline the Vex physicians had called existential contentment syndrome. They had offered their condolences and a sedative. Now Jax understood it wasn't a syndrome. It was the intended outcome. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "What's the job?" Silas smiled. A real smile this time, full of grim satisfaction. "There's a scientist, Dr. Eris Thorne. He was one of the original architects of the Human Vex integration program. He believed in them, championed them. But he started seeing things, anomalies in the data he couldn't explain. The Vex found out he was asking questions. They didn't kill him. That would be too crude. They discredited him, labeled him mentally unstable, and sentenced him to rehabilitation at the Pinnacle." The Pinnacle, a gleaming spire in the heart of what was once Chicago, officially a center for advanced neurological therapy. Unofficially, it was a place people went when they thought too much, when they deviated from the Vex's carefully constructed harmony. No one ever came back the same. You want me to break into the most secure Vex facility on the planet and extract a man who is probably a ghost of his former self? Jax asked. The sheer audacity of the plan staggering. He has the original, unredacted data from the integration, Ilara explained, her voice urgent. The core programming of the suppression virus, its transmission vectors, everything. He encoded it, locked it away where even the Vex can't get to it without his biometrics and voice print. That data is the key. With it, we can prove what they're doing. We can develop a counteragent. We can fight back. Thorne is our only shot, Silas added. The facility is a black box. But we have a window. A maintenance cycle for the primary energy grid is scheduled in 3 days for 47 seconds. The internal security systems will be running on secondary power, too. It's not much, but it's the only opening we'll ever get. Jax looked from Silas's determined face to Ilara's fiery gaze. This was suicide, a direct assault on the heart of the Vex's power. But the image of his brother's vacant eyes flashed in his mind, the memory of his vibrant life fading to a dull, placid gray. He thought of the harmony bells not as a lullaby, but as a funeral dirge for his entire species. He was a courier, a ghost in the system. But once, he had been something more, a man who got things done, a man who could move through the shadows. He picked up the data slate. I'll need a schematic of the facility and a list of every piece of pre-concordance tech you have that can still throw a punch. This isn't a retrieval, Silas. It's a declaration of war. We're not just getting Thorne back. We're going to show our keepers that the zoo is about to have a breakout. For the first time in decades, a genuine, dangerous human smile touched Jax's lips. The Vex had taken everything from humanity, lulling them to sleep with gifts and comfort. They had forgotten one crucial thing about the species they were trying to tame. Even the most docile animal, when cornered, will remember how to bite. The age of peace was over. The age of rage was about to begin. The next 3 days were a blur of frantic, whispered activity in the bowels of Neo Denver's Undercity. The alcove behind Ilara's stall became their war room, the air thick with the smell of soldering flux and nervous sweat. Silas, a ghost on a flickering comm screen, provided tactical oversight while Ilara and Jax became the frantic heart of the operation. The schematics for the Pinnacle were a nightmare. A Vex design philosophy of nested, interlocking systems that made every corridor a potential trap. There were no straightforward paths, only energy conduits, atmospheric circulation vents, and waste reclamation tunnels, the building's forgotten veins, which would have to serve as their arteries. They don't build with weaknesses in mind, Ilara muttered, her fingers flying across a holographic projection of the spire, peeling back layers of the structure. Everything is redundant. self-healing. But they do have one blind spot they can't comprehend: organized chaos. They expect systems to fail, but not to be deliberately broken in a way that looks like a failure. That became the core of their strategy. They wouldn't just use the 47-second window. They would create a series of cascading, minor malfunctions in the minutes leading up to it, a symphony of electronic noise to distract the facility's central AI. The gear Jax had requested was laid out on a worn blanket, a collection of museum pieces and brutish prototypes. There was a kinetic pulse rifle, a pre-concordance relic that fired a non-lethal but incredibly powerful concussive blast, designed for riot control. It was loud, ugly, and utterly untraceable by Vex energy sensors. Beside it lay a magnetic coil launcher, little more than a powerful electromagnet attached to a rifle stock, designed to fire grappling hooks. Their most crucial piece of equipment was Alara's masterpiece, the Ghost, a handheld device bristling with cobbled-together Vex and human tech. It was designed to spoof Vex identification signals for short periods, making them appear as friendly maintenance drones to the system, but its power cell was unstable, prone to overheating. Push it too hard, and it'll either melt in your hand or announce our presence to every arbitrator in the sector, Alara warned, her expression grim. As they worked, an unspoken tension built between them. Jax, methodical and detached, broke down every phase of the infiltration into a series of calculated risks. He moved with a cold efficiency that unnerved Alara, a relic of a past she could only guess at. He was assessing angles, planning for contingencies she hadn't even considered, his mind a cold labyrinth of violence and survival. "You enjoy this, don't you?" she asked on the second night, as he field-stripped and reassembled the kinetic rifle for the 10th time. He didn't look up, his hands moving with an automatic, practiced grace. "Enjoyment has nothing to do with it. You're building the key. I'm figuring out how to use it without getting us both killed. This is just a problem with a set of variables. The Vex, the guards, the system, Thorn. We control the variables we can, and we plan for the ones we can't." His detached tone was more chilling than any open display of aggression. For Jax, this wasn't about hope or rebellion. It was a grim, necessary task. He saw his brother Leo's face in the polished surface of the rifle's stock. Not the smiling boy he'd grown up with, but the hollowed-out shell he'd become, his spark extinguished by the Vex's silent, creeping poison. This wasn't a mission. It was an exorcism. Their journey to Neo-Chicago was through the silent, dark arteries of the old world. They traveled by a maglev service train through a vacuum tube that had been decommissioned for half a century, its existence wiped from all official maps. The ride was a long, rattling plunge into darkness, a journey back in time. When they emerged, it was into the flooded ruins of the old city's lower transit system, a concrete tomb beneath the Vex's gleaming metropolis. They moved through the suffocating darkness, their rebreathers hissing, the beams of their headlamps cutting through water thick with decades of silt. Above them, they could feel the faint, rhythmic hum of the new world, a constant reminder of the alien superstructure that had been built atop humanity's bones. The final ascent into the pinnacle was a vertical climb up a colossal, forgotten storm drain, its walls slick with algae. Jax went first, firing the magnetic launcher upwards, the grapple biting into ancient steel with a reassuring thud. He scaled the cable with the quiet competence of a predator, securing a line for Alara. As she followed, her ghost device strapped to her back, her gaze was fixed on the circular grate hundreds of feet above. The distant, pale moonlight, a promise of the sterile world they were about to enter. They emerged into a maintenance sublevel, the air instantly changing from damp and organic to cold, sterile, and ionized. The distant chime of the harmony bells was audible here, a soft, insidious hum that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. "We're in," Alara whispered, her eyes scanning the readouts on her wrist-mounted slate. "The first cascade is initiated, a power fluctuation in the East Wing's climate control. The system sees it, logs it, and moves on. It's the first pebble in the avalanche." They moved through silent, white corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. There were no guards here, only the occasional maintenance drone that would glide past, its optical sensors giving them a cursory scan before the ghost's spoofed signal placated it. The true horror of the pinnacle was its quiet serenity. They passed observation windows looking into common rooms where patients, dressed in simple white tunics, sat staring at holographic trees or playing simple games with a placid, unnerving contentment. Their faces were smooth, free of worry or ambition. They were the Vex's success stories, the end product of the suppression virus. They were hollow. Jax felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was Leo's fate, multiplied by millions. "We're approaching the high security wing," Alara breathed, pointing down a corridor that ended in a shimmering energy field. "Thorn's cell is 2 levels up, directly above us. The access conduit is behind that panel." The energy field sizzled softly, casting a blue glow on their tense faces. "The ghost can get us through, but it'll drain the power cell by at least 30%. We'll only have one shot at spoofing our way out." Jax nodded, his hand resting on the stock of his kinetic rifle. "Let's not plan on coming back this way." Alara worked quickly, her fingers dancing over the panel. With a soft hiss, a section of the seamless wall retracted, revealing a narrow vertical shaft filled with thick bundles of fiber optic cables. As Jax prepared to use the magnetic launcher again, Alara's slate beeped frantically. "Hold on," she whispered, her eyes wide. "There's an unscheduled diagnostic sweep happening. It's a Vex arbitrator right above us. It's off its patrol route." The hum of an anti-grav motor grew steadily louder from the top of the shaft. They had been careful, but the Vex system was more unpredictable than they had anticipated. A chrome-plated foot descended into view, followed by the impossibly slender, insectoid form of the arbitrator as it began to float down the shaft, its single, glowing red optic sweeping the darkness. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Jax acted on pure instinct. He grabbed Alara, pulling her tight against the wall and into the deepest shadow cast by the cable bundles. He shielded her body with his own, his breath held, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He could feel her trembling behind him. The arbitrator descended, its red eye cutting through the gloom. It was so close he could see the intricate etchings on its chrome chassis. So close he could hear the soft whir of its internal mechanisms. Its light passed over them, lingering for a fraction of a second. Jax's entire body tensed, ready to unleash a concussive blast that would surely bring the entire facility down on their heads. But the light moved on. The ghost. Even while idle, it is leaking just enough of a friendly signal to make them appear as a minor sensor ghost, a piece of background noise not worth investigating. The arbitrator continued its descent, passing them by, and disappeared into the depths of the spire. They waited in the suffocating silence for a full minute before Alara let out a shaky breath. That was not in the plan. "Get used to it," Jax said, his voice a low growl as he released her. "The plan is a ghost. We're the ones who have to make it real." They ascended the rest of the way in tense silence, emerging into another sterile white corridor. According to the schematics, this was it. Thorne's containment unit was just around the corner. On Alara's slate, a timer was counting down. 2 minutes until the maintenance cycle. 2 minutes until their 47-second window. Jax took the lead, rifle at the ready. He peered around the edge of the corridor, his blood running cold at what he saw. The hallway was empty, save for one figure. It was not a drone or a standard arbitrator. Standing motionless before the reinforced door of Thorne's cell was a Vex Justicar. It was taller, sleeker than a normal arbitrator, its armor a polished, obsidian black that seemed to drink the light. Its limbs were more defined, ending in razor-sharp claws, and instead of a single optic, its head was a smooth, featureless cowl that radiated a palpable sense of menace. Justicars were the Vex's elite enforcers, spoken of only in hushed rumors in the Undercity. They were faster, stronger, and smarter, and Silas's intel hadn't said a word about one being here. The plan hadn't just gone off the rails, it had plunged into a chasm. Their carefully orchestrated symphony of distractions, their 47-second window, their single concussive rifle, all of it felt like children's toys against the silent, deadly sentinel standing between them and the one man who could save humanity. Alara looked at Jax, her face pale, all the fire in her eyes replaced by dawning horror. The timer on her slate ticked past 1 minute and 40 seconds. The harmony bells chimed softly, mockingly, in the silent, tomb-like corridor. They were trapped, deep in the enemy's heart, with an impossible guardian at the gate. The breakout was over before it had even begun. A cold, predatory calm settled over Jax, pushing the shock and fear into a distant corner of his mind. The Justicar was an unforeseen variable, a fatal one. His old life had taught him that when a plan implodes, you don't mourn it, you scavenge the wreckage for a weapon. He held up a hand, signaling Alara to stay back, his eyes never leaving the obsidian statue down the hall. His mind raced, processing the new, terrifying equation. The kinetic rifle was a noisemaker. It might stagger the Justicar, but it would also trigger every alarm in the pinnacle. Their ghost device was for fooling machines, not a sentient, highly advanced alien warrior. That left one option, the one he had hoped to avoid, the part of himself he had tried to bury beneath years of quiet compliance, the path of the ghost. He touched his comm. "Silas," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "Code Black, Pinnacle, Thorne's cell is guarded, Justicar." The silence on the other end was heavy with the weight of shattered hope. When Silas's voice came back, it was thin, strained. "Abort, Jax. Get out of there. That's an order." "Negative," Jax replied, his gaze locked on his target. "The window is closing. Tell me about Justicars. What do they see? What do they hear?" "We don't know." Silas's voice crackled. "The data is fragmented. They're biosynthetic, not purely mechanical. They operate on a different sensory spectrum. Rumors say they can sense intent, aggression. Sense intent." The phrase echoed in Jax's mind. You couldn't sneak up on something that could feel you coming. You couldn't fight something that knew your next move before you did. But what if you had no intent? What if you were just a piece of the environment? He looked at Alara, whose face was a mask of disbelief and terror. "The distraction," he mouthed silently, pointing at her slate. "Do it now." She hesitated, her eyes pleading with him. This was suicide. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. "Trust me," gritting her teeth. She initiated the final phase of their electronic assault. Across the facility, a dozen minor systems simultaneously threw up error codes, a climate regulator in the botany bay, a sonic sterilizer in the mess hall, a holographic display in a recreational lounge, a flurry of insignificant, ghost-in-the-machine glitches designed to draw the central AI's attention. The timer on her slate hit 1 minute. Down the hall, the Justicar remained perfectly still. The distractions weren't enough. It was focused. It was waiting. Jax handed the kinetic rifle to Alara. "If I go down, you fire. Don't aim for it. Aim for the ceiling, the walls. Cause a structural breach. Buy yourself time to get to the shaft. Go." Before she could protest, he turned and began to walk. Not run, not sneak. He walked down the sterile white corridor at a steady, unhurried pace, his footfalls silent on the polished floor. He emptied his mind, pushing out thoughts of the mission, of Thorn, of his brother. He became a maintenance worker on his way to fix a flickering light. He was nothing, nobody, a ghost in the machine. The Justicar's featureless head slowly tilted, its entire form rotating with an unnerving, silent fluidity to face him. Jax didn't falter. He kept his breathing even, his heart rate steady. He could feel the alien senses washing over him, a strange, tingling pressure in the air. It was searching for the telltale spark of aggression, the hum of adrenaline, the signature of a threat. He gave it nothing. He was just a man walking down a hallway, 10 meters away. The Justicar's obsidian claws flexed, a micro-movement of deadly potential. 5 meters. Jax could see his own distorted reflection in its polished black armor. He was so close he could feel a faint coolness radiating from its body. He didn't look at it. His eyes were focused on the control panel next to Thorn's door, just past the Justicar's shoulder. His intent was not to fight the guard, but to access the panel. It was a subtle, desperate mental feint. The timer hit 48 seconds. The moment the main power grid went down, a soft thrum echoed through the corridor. The blue energy field over the high-security entrance flickered and died. The lights dimmed, switching to the eerie red glow of the emergency system. The 47-second window had opened. Jax lunged. In that single explosive moment, all pretense of calm vanished. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a storm. He didn't go for the Justicar, but for the wall beside it, planting his foot high and kicking off, using the Vex warrior's own body as a springboard. The maneuver was so unexpected, so chaotically human, that it bought him a precious nanosecond. As he flew through the air, and he slammed his hand against the emergency release on Thorn's door panel, a feature mandated by some long-forgotten pre-concordance safety protocol. The Justicar moved with a speed that defied physics. A black arm blurred, not a punch or a strike, but an elegant, lethal slash. One of its claws raked across Jax's side, shearing through his jacket and the flesh beneath like it was paper. A line of fire erupted along his ribs, but he ignored it, his momentum carrying him past the creature as the heavy door to Thorn's cell hissed open. He tumbled inside, rolling to his feet as the Justicar spun to pursue him. "Alara, now!" he roared. From the end of the hall, the kinetic rifle boomed, not with a crack, but a deep, resonant whump. A shimmering disk of force slammed into the ceiling above the Justicar, shattering the light panels and sending a shower of crystalline fragments raining down. It was a distraction, nothing more, but it was enough. Jax slammed the door's internal control, and it hissed shut just as the Justicar's claws scraped against the metal, leaving 4 deep gouges in the reinforced alloy. He was trapped inside with Thorn, with an alien killing machine just outside the door, and a fresh, bleeding wound in his side. The cell was stark white and padded. In the center, a man sat on a simple cot, his head shaved, his eyes wide and unfocused. He looked frail, almost translucent under the soft lighting. This was Eris Thorn, humanity's last hope. He looked more like a ghost than Jax had. "Dr. Thorn," Jax said. His voice strained as he pressed a hand to his bleeding side. "My name is Jax. We're getting you out of here." Thorn didn't seem to register his presence. He was rocking back and forth slightly, whispering to himself. "The pattern is elegant," he murmured. "So simple. A perfect closed loop. They folded our genome like origami." Outside, a heavy thud rattled the door. The Justicar was trying to get in. "Doctor, we don't have time for this," Jax snapped, grabbing the man's tunic. "The data, the counteragent, where is it?" Thorn blinked, his gaze slowly focusing on Jax's face, then on the blood seeping through his fingers. The sight of it seemed to break through the chemical fog the Vex had put him in. "Data," he repeated, his voice raspy. "It's not data. It's music." Another thud, louder this time. The door groaned, a slight dent appearing in its center. "What are you talking about?" Jax demanded, his patience evaporating. "I'm talking about the key," Thorn said, a flicker of his old brilliance returning to his eyes. "The Vex think in algorithms, in pure data. I knew they would search any digital storage, so I converted it. I translated the suppression virus's core code into a musical sequence, a complex melody. Then I encoded that melody into my own DNA, hidden in the junk sequences, using a pre-concordance bio-encryption technique. The only way to unlock it is with my voice, singing the activation phrase." Jax stared at him, staggered by the sheer, desperate genius of it, a song hidden in his blood. The activation phrase. A third, deafening thud echoed through the room. The door buckled inward, a hairline fracture appearing on its surface. "A line from an old poem," Thorn whispered, a faint, sad smile on his face. "One my mother used to read to me. Do not go gentle into that good night." The door screamed as the Justicar slammed into it again, the metal tearing. A razor-sharp black claw pierced through, then another. The creature was ripping its way in. There was no escape. They were in a sealed box with a monster at the door. Ilara couldn't help them. The kinetic rifle was useless. They were dead. A grim, fatalistic clarity washed over Jax. He looked at Thorn's terrified, yet strangely lucid face. They had come for a key, a weapon to save their species. And here it was in the form of a frail old man and a line of poetry. They wouldn't get out alive. But Thorn's secret didn't have to die with them. Jax ripped a comlink from his wrist and shoved it into Thorn's hand. "Sing it," he ordered, his voice raw. "Sing it now. To this. There's someone on the other end. She'll record it." Thorn stared at the comm, then at the door, which was now being torn open like a tin can. The Justicar's featureless black face peered through the widening gap. Jax stepped between them, picking up the only thing in the room that could be a weapon, the heavy metal base of the cot. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Rage," Jax said, his voice a low, guttural growl, meeting the Justicar's unseen gaze. Rage against the dying of the light. He hefted the metal slab, blood dripping from his side. A final, defiant act in a world that had forgotten how. Behind him, as the monster stepped into the room, Eris Thorn closed his eyes, held the calm to his lips, and, in a trembling but clear voice, began to sing. The song that left Eris Thorn's lips was not a battle hymn. It was a lament, a complex, mournful melody that filled the small, sterile room with a profound and ancient sadness. It spoke of starlight and falling leaves, of forgotten histories and the quiet ache of a species losing its soul. The notes rose and fell in a sequence that was both mathematically precise and heartbreakingly beautiful. Transmitted over the open comlink, it was a ghost of a sound, a final, desperate message in a bottle thrown into an uncaring ocean. Silas and Ilara, huddled in the damp darkness of the Chicago ruins, heard it as a stream of corrupted, ethereal static. But the recording software captured every single nuance. The Justicar paused for a fraction of a second as the first notes reached it, its head tilting as if processing an unfamiliar stimulus. Music, true human music, was an anomaly in the Vex's world of harmonious, predictable chimes. But the pause was fleeting. It was a predator, and its prey was in front of it. Jax didn't wait. He roared, a raw, primal sound of pure defiance, and charged, swinging the heavy cot bass in a wide, desperate arc. The attack was clumsy, it's telegraphed, the last act of a cornered animal. The Justicar sidestepped the blow with impossible grace, the metal pipe whistling through the space where it had been a millisecond before. Its arm blurred, and a black claw lashed out, not to kill, but to disarm. The claw caught the metal base, and with a screech of protesting steel, the makeshift weapon was ripped from Jax's grasp and sent clattering into a corner. Before Jax could even register the loss of his weapon, a second strike came, a precise open palm blow to his chest. It didn't feel like a punch. It felt like being hit by a freight train. The air exploded from his lungs, and he was thrown backward, his head cracking against the padded wall with a sickening thud. Stars burst behind his eyes, and the world dissolved into a gray, swimming haze. He slid to the floor, his body screaming in protest, the wound in his side a bonfire of agony. Through the ringing in his ears, he could still hear Thorn's song, now trembling but unbroken. The Justicar took a step toward the frail scientist, its purpose clear. Its mission was not to capture, but to sanitize. Thorn and his secret were a loose thread in the Vex's perfect tapestry, and it was here to snip it. Jax's vision began to clear. He saw the Justicar raise its bladed hand. He saw Thorn, his eyes squeezed shut, continuing to sing his defiant elegy. The Vex had taken his brother. They had bled his species dry, and now they were about to extinguish its last, flickering ember of hope right in front of him. Rage, pure and incandescent, flooded his system, a chemical fire that burned away the pain and the encroaching darkness. He had nothing left to lose. He had no weapon, no plan, no hope of survival. All he had was the body the Vex had failed to completely pacify. Pushing off the floor, he launched himself at the Justicar's back, his arms wrapping around its slender torso. It was like tackling a statue of polished steel. His attack did nothing to halt its advance, but it did something far more important. It surprised the creature. In the Vex's calculus, his role in the fight was over. He was neutralized, a non-threat. This illogical, suicidal act of defiance was a data point for which it had no immediate response. The Justicar tried to shrug him off, but Jax held on with the tenacity of a dying wolf, his fingers digging for purchase on the smooth, seamless armor. He couldn't stop it, but he could delay it. He could be an anchor, a final, bloody-minded annoyance. He drove his knee into the back of the Justicar's leg, A move that would have shattered a human joint. Here, it produced only a dull clang, but it was enough to make the creature stumble, its raised hand wavering for a crucial second. Thorn's song reached its final, soaring crescendo, and then fell silent. The message was sent. "It's done," Thorn whispered, his eyes opening to look at Jax. In them was not fear, but a strange, peaceful acceptance. Run. The Justicar had had enough. With a flick of its torso, it sent Jax flying. He hit the wall again, and this time, consciousness began to fray for good. The last thing he saw before the world went black was the Justicar turning its featureless face from Thorn toward him, and Alara's face on his wristcom, her mouth open in a silent scream as the connection finally severed. He awoke to chaos. The sterile white room was gone, replaced by the grimy, dripping ceiling of a sewer tunnel. The air smelled of rust and decay. A sharp, searing pain in his side made him gasp. He looked down to see a crude, glowing patch applied to his wound, a medical cauterizer Alara must have scavenged. "Easy," a voice rasped. "You've been out for almost an hour. Thought we lost you." Alara was kneeling beside him, her face smudged with grime, her eyes hollowed out with exhaustion and grief. "Thorn," Jax managed, his voice a dry croak. She shook her head, a single sharp movement. "I heard the whole thing. The song, then the sound of the fight, then nothing. I had to go. The moment the main power came back online, the entire facility went into lockdown. Arbitrators were everywhere. She had done the smart thing, the only thing. She had saved the mission, if not the man. She had escaped with the recording, the fragile musical key to humanity's future. Jax, however, was not part of that mission anymore. He was a liability, a loose end left behind in the heart of the enemy's fortress. "How did I get here?" he asked, pushing himself up on one elbow, the effort making the world spin. "He did," Alara said, nodding toward the shadows. A figure detached itself from the darkness. It was a Vex, not a gleaming arbitrator or a terrifying Justicar, but something else entirely. It was hunched, its chrome chassis scuffed and dented. One of its optical sensors was dark, and it moved with a slight, almost imperceptible limp. It was a defective unit, a piece of Vex technology that had somehow fallen through the cracks. "Unit 734, the Vexus said, its voice a synthesized monotone, yet lacking the crisp, perfect modulation of the others. It was distorted, fuzzy. Designation, sanitation, and waste reclamation. My programming is aberrant. I observed your infiltration. My directives indicated I should report you. I chose not to." Jax stared at the damaged machine. A Vex with free will. It was impossible. "Why, the Harmony Bells," Unit 734 stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "They are mathematically simplistic, repetitive, inefficient. They offend my core processing." Alara offered a grim smile. "Turns out our savior is a disgruntled janitor with an ear for music. He found you in the wreckage of Thorn's cell and dragged you into the waste reclamation system before the arbitrators arrived. He says the Justicar left you for dead." Left for dead. The phrase hung in the air. The Justicar, a perfect Vex-killing machine, had failed to confirm its kill. It was an oversight so profound, so out of character, that it didn't make sense. Unless it wasn't an oversight. The creature had felt his intent. It knew he was a threat, but it had also witnessed his final, illogical act of self-sacrifice, an action devoid of any hope for personal gain or survival, perhaps in its alien calculus. Such an act was so far outside its understanding of aggression that it had registered as an anomaly worth preserving. Or perhaps it simply hadn't cared, its primary objective silencing Thorn complete. Either way, he was alive. A ghost the system had failed to purge. "Where do we go from here?" Jax asked, the reality of their situation crashing down on him. They were deep in enemy territory, one of them badly wounded, with the entire Vex security apparatus now fully aware of a human insurgency. "We get the recording to Silas," Alara said, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual fire. 734 knows the old transit networks. It can guide us, but we're not going back to Neo-Denver. That cell is compromised. Silas is already on the move. He's rallying the other cells. The other cells. For the first time, Jax realized their small group was just one flickering candle in a much larger darkness. There were others, rallying them for what he asked. For a war. "Not yet," Alara replied, her eyes dark. "First, we need to turn that song back into a weapon. We need to build a cure. And for that, we need a laboratory the Vex don't know exists. A place with the right equipment, hidden from their eyes in the sky." She looked at Jax, her expression a mixture of desperation and resolve. "We're going to the one place on Earth the Vex never bothered to tame, because they believed it was already dead." She pulled up a map on her slate, a satellite image of a vast, desolate landscape scarred by ancient craters and radiation burns, a place of forgotten wars and ecological collapse, shunned for centuries. "The Deadlands. Our new base of operations," she said, "is a pre-concordance nuclear bunker buried half a mile beneath that wasteland. And our only way in is through the ruins of a city the Vex left to rot." Jax followed her finger on the map to a name that sent a chill down his spine. A name from the history books, synonymous with humanity's self-destructive past. Las Vegas. Their path forward was not a retreat to safety, but a deeper plunge into the shadows, into the broken heart of the old world. They had their weapon, a song of sorrow. Now they had to carry it through hell to give it teeth. The journey to the Deadlands was a descent into a forgotten world. Guided by the aberrant sanitation drone, Unit 734, they navigated a phantom network of rusted service tunnels and collapsed subway lines that crisscrossed the continent like the petrified arteries of a dead giant. Above them, the Vex Concordance continued its serene, silent reign, oblivious to the ghosts stirring in its foundations. For Jax, the journey was a fever dream, punctuated by moments of searing pain from his wound and the low, distorted hum of 734's malfunctioning vocalizer. Alara tended to him with a grim, focused efficiency, her usual fiery demeanor tempered by a new, somber gravity. They were fugitives now, carrying the last hope of their species in a fragile data slate. The song Thorn had sung was their scripture. Their pilgrimage was to a tomb in the desert. They emerged from a storm drain into the skeletal remains of what was once the outskirts of Las Vegas, and the sight was breathtaking in its desolation. The Vex had never bothered to rebuild here. Why would they? This was a monument to humanity's excess and failure, a perfect example of the chaos they had come to save them from. Crystalline spires gave way to shattered neon signs and crumbling, sun-bleached casinos that leaned against each other like tired drunks. A fine red dust, stirred by a hot, mournful wind, coated everything, and the harmony bells were blessedly, profoundly absent. Here, the only sound was the whistling of the wind through broken windows and the soft crunch of their boots on glass-strewn asphalt. Silas is broadcasting on a secure, low-frequency band, Ilara said, her hand shielding her slate from the glare of the swollen, setting sun. He's calling it the Nightingale frequency. The recording is out. Other cells are receiving it. Scientists who went into hiding decades ago are starting to work on it. But we have the original, the clearest copy. The labs in the bunker are our best shot at synthesizing a counter-agent first. Their destination was a fortified pre-concordance military installation, codenamed Sand Trap, buried beneath the ruins of a massive, pyramid-shaped casino. According to 734's archived schematics, its systems were self-contained, powered by a geothermal tap that had likely kept it running in silent standby for over a century. Getting there meant crossing the old city center, a treacherous labyrinth of unstable structures and unpredictable dangers. It was here that they encountered the first true ghosts of the old world. They weren't Vex. They were human. Scrappers, tribals, the descendants of those who had refused to enter the Vex's cities, choosing a harsh, brutal freedom over gilded slavery. They emerged from the shadows of a collapsed parking garage, their faces hidden behind sand goggles and makeshift rebreathers, their bodies draped in rags and scavenged armor. They brandished crude, effective weapons, sharpened rebar spears, jury-rigged pneumatic rifles, and the menacing hum of a still functional industrial cutting laser. Their leader, a tall woman with a face like cracked leather and eyes as hard as obsidian, leveled a rusty shotgun at Jax. "The drone is Vex," she stated, her voice a harsh rasp. "And you two smell like city sleepers. Give me one reason why we don't strip you for parts and water." "We are not with them," Ilara said, raising her hands slowly. "We're fighting them." The woman laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Fighting the gods. We tried that 50 years ago. They broke us. Now we just survive. They're not gods." Jax grunted, leaning heavily on the drone for support, his hand hovering over his sidearm. "They're farmers, and we're the crop. We have proof." He saw a flicker of something in the woman's hard eyes, not belief, but curiosity. He told her about the pinnacle, about Thorn, about the suppression virus that was slowly bleeding their species of its soul. He told her about the song. When he finished, the silence was heavy. The woman, whose name was Mara, stared at him for a long time. "You want to wake people up," she said, a note of grim understanding in her voice. "You have no idea what you're asking for. Waking up hurts. When the Vex came, they offered peace. Most of us took it. The ones who didn't. We fought. We raged. And we lost. Waking up means remembering that pain." "It's better than dying in our sleep," Jax countered, his voice raw with conviction. "Your way. You survive. Our way. We live." His words, born of pain and desperation, struck a chord. Mara lowered her shotgun. "The sand trap bunker," she said. "We know of it. We thought it was a tomb. If you can open it, and if what you say is true, you'll need more than 2 city sleepers and a broken drone to hold it. You'll need an army." The alliance was forged not on trust, but on a shared, ancient enemy. Mara and her tribe of desert survivors became their guides and their guards, leading them through the treacherous ruins. In return, Jax and Ilara promised them a future, a chance to reclaim not just their world, but themselves. They reached the base of the Pyramid Casino as twin moons rose in the bruised twilight sky. Using 734's knowledge of the building's original infrastructure, they found the service entrance to the bunker, A massive blast door hidden behind a collapsed section of the main casino floor. It was sealed tight, its systems dormant. It took the combined skills of Alara's hacking and Mara's brutal, practical engineering to coax the ancient machinery back to life. With a groan of metal that had been silent for 100 years, the blast door shuddered open, revealing a passage that led deep into the earth. The air that washed over them was cool, dry, and sterile. The bunker was a time capsule. Emergency lights flickered on as they entered, illuminating state-of-the-art laboratories, barracks, and command centers, all untouched, all waiting. They had made it. In the deepest, most shielded part of the lab, Alara plugged the slate into the central mainframe. Thorn's haunting melody filled the room, not as a whisper over a comm, but in crystal-clear digital fidelity. The bunker's powerful computers began their work, analyzing the complex bioacoustic code, translating the song of sorrow back into the language of life. Days turned into weeks. The bunker became a hive of activity. More of Mara's people arrived, securing the perimeter. Other resistant cells, guided by Silas, began to make the perilous journey to the Deadlands, bringing with them what scientists and resources they could muster. The sand trap was no longer a tomb. It was the capital of a revolution. Jax, slowly recovering from his wound, found a new purpose. He wasn't a retriever or a courier anymore. He was a soldier. He trained Mara's scrappers, blending their savage survival skills with the tactical discipline of his former life, forging them into a guerrilla army. He and Mara, two sides of humanity's broken coin, developed a grudging, profound respect for one another. He represented the world that had been lost to complacency. She, the world that had been saved by stubborn refusal. Finally, the day came. Alara, her face pale with exhaustion but her eyes blazing with triumph, held up a single, glowing hypo spray. "It's done," she announced to the assembled leaders in the command center. "A retroviral agent uses the Vex's own delivery system against them. It doesn't just neutralize the suppression virus, it reverses its effects. But it's not a cure. It's an awakening." The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Using their network of sleeper cells, they would introduce the counteragent into the Vex atmospheric processors and replicator networks in a single, a coordinated global strike. It wouldn't be a quiet reversal. It would be a shock to the system. Billions of people, placid and content for decades, would suddenly have the full spectrum of human emotion and ambition come rushing back. It would be chaos. It would be beautiful. It would be war. As the final preparations were made, Jack stood with Mara on the broken balcony of a penthouse suite in the ruined pyramid, looking out over the silent, moonlit desert. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Mara asked, her voice quiet. "The Vex won't just leave. They'll fight to keep their pets in the cage. And the people we're waking up, they'll be angry, confused, terrified. We're not just starting a war with the Vex. We're starting a war within ourselves." Jax thought of his brother, of Eris Thorn singing his last song in a white, padded cell. He thought of the justicare, of the cold, calculated domestication of his entire species. "Let them be angry," he said, his voice as cold and hard as the desert night. "Rage is a start. We'll teach them what to do with it. The Vex wanted a harvest. Let's show them what humanity looks like when it's finally allowed to grow wild." He looked up at the stars, no longer hidden by the glow of a Vex city or the hum of their perfect sterile world. They were sharp, clear, and infinite. For the first time in his life, they looked like a frontier, not a ceiling. The age of Earth had not ended with the arrival of the Vex. It had been sleeping, and the dawn was about to break.